and it's historic and it's functional. So the same should apply to Founders Theatre today. Just get this building up and running and with a minimal cost, and I'm sure you're available. You're sure you're with this minimal cost business. It is ratepayers' money basically that's being spent here, and to phrase it, it should be used as enough is enough. So upgrade only. Don't borrow huge amounts of money unless you have to on these new buildings some people want. Regional finance should be involved in this because they use our theatre as well. This building is historic and should remain where it is without altering the outside appearance. The strength of Founders Theatre is the site, the size and where it is in our city. So in my view, leave it where it is and spend as little as possible. Only upgrade this valuable asset. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. There'll be some questions. Councillor Mallett.
Thanks for your submission, Noel. Appreciate that.
Good.
And I agree with a lot of what you say. But are you aware that we have found there is, as well as deferred maintenance that hasn't been kept up to date, where there is significant structural issues with regard to earthquake?
I understand that has come to fore, but
which we've only just which has only been solidified recently. Yeah.
But I think other than the structural thing, I think a lot of work should be done, and it happens time and time again in situation that really, really bugs me. And I think it puts a dent in the council spending because that work costs more later. And that's wrong.
And do I take it from your submission you're comfortable with the location? There has been people suggesting it should be at the
no way.
Part of the river plan.
No, stay where it is, I think. It's where it is, and I think the founders originally, and it said that was the best site in the city, and I still maintain it is, because it's on its own piece of land. It stands out, and that's brilliant.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, no other questions, Noel? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation.
No problem.
Thanks for coming along.
Nice to be back.
All right. Okay. The next speaker is Adrian Pickering, and that number is 1635. So, Adrian, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
5 minutes allocated, including questions.
Yeah. Right, Your Worship, good morning, and good morning, councillors and staff and others here. I am Adrian Pickering. I'm a registered architect. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I wish to speak because I have concerns about the options that was put forward for consideration. I believe the Hamilton Founders Memorial Theatre should remain. I joined the architectural and engineering firm of Leader, Leal and Fraser, who was the designing architects, just after the theatre was being completed in the early 60s. The options presented offer basically two choices: bring the Founders up to concert theatre standard, or demolish it and build a new theatre. The options do not include building a new theatre on a new site, as well as retaining and revalidating the Founders building for continued use in maybe a restricted role. If it is demolished, a significant and useful theatre will be lost. It has served the original purpose very successfully for over 50 years, seating around 1,200. The design of the theatre was regarded at the time as being significant for a growing city and was, as you are aware, funded by public donation. The design architect, Aubrey de Leal, went on an overseas study trip to research the latest overseas design trends for theatres. The brief was difficult. The funds were limited, but the final result was a major achievement. The brief was for a theatre that would serve a variety of purposes. It was a multi-purpose brief, from small-scale dramatic productions with no amplification to large-scale musical productions with full amplification. Overseas examples at the time serving a similar brief favoured a fan-shaped auditorium to bring the audience close to the stage and give good sightlines, which is what was done with the Founders, of course. The Founders Auditorium has a ceiling and side walls which are designed specially to allow good penetration and clarity of unamplified speech and music. It purposely did not have a large overhead volume, giving long reverberation time, which is necessary for large choral and orchestral performances. But if it had, this would have would not have been suitable for the many other uses that the building was intended for. The brief called for a fly tower for dramatic performances. The fly tower has posed a difficulty of late, but current technology allows arrays of LED screens to form backdrops and cycloramas, which can provide very effective, realistic sets, which can be changed effortlessly and instantly. Now, because of its specific design form, the building is not well suited to being enlarged or to have its inherent acoustic properties altered. The size of the auditorium and stage are suited to each other. The volume of the auditorium does not produce long reverberation time. However, the performances for which it was intended still require a suitable venue, and the Founders provides for these. Specific types of performances, such as opera or symphony orchestra, really need specific theatres which are not suitable for the multi-purposes at present served. The building is of reinforced concrete with steel trusses, engineered by Colin Fraser. It's not true that the building is structurally unsound. I have access to a structural report dated 7th of December 2007, produced for the Hamilton City Council by Gordon Hughes, an independent consulting engineer, which analysed the structure of the building from the original engineering drawings and found it met the requirements of the building code. The report also makes the comment that the building was well designed and is in good condition and is not earthquake prone. I have to stop.
Oh, if you've got a couple more sentences.
There would appear to be no valid structural reasons prohibiting its continued use. The Founders is a good building, serving the community well. Why demolish a perfectly good building? I do welcome the idea of a new theatre. I think it'll be great. But, and there's lots of practical ways of doing that, I believe. There's people have got, there's groups that would be quite keen to get behind a new theatre, and it could be specific for those sort of purposes which the Founders doesn't meet.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your
Councillor
time.
Mallett, question?
Thank you very much for your submission. Did I hear you say at the very end that you had seen the original plans or something, did you? Or you saw us when you were
Yes.
talking?
Yeah, Gordon Hughes, who did the... He's got copies of the original drawings, which he analysed, which he did for his analysis, his structural analysis.
You got his phone number?
I've got his report here.
Because genuinely, our staff are telling us that they can't get those papers.
No, I don't think.
Well, hang on, well, that's what we were told yesterday.
Yeah.
Sean, could you just clarify, please?
Look, we'll check with what plans Mr Hughes had, but certainly I suspect he's working off the same plans that our engineers have worked off.
I can
Okay,
actually-
so
I can help you with that. Gordon Hughes has been approached by the engineers which are now doing the detailed assessment,
okay.
and he has given access to the drawings which he used.
Your Worship, his mobile number is 0274 7332
Good,
59.
thank you.
This is fantastic. This is
So-
the sort of
so come on,
stuff that
let's
comes
focus
out in these
here.
submissions.
So
Excuse me, we are focusing on things that are
thank you,
utterly
Adrian.
relevant to what
Quiet.
we're talking about
Thank
here.
you, Adrian, for clarifying.
Thank you, Worship.
No, hold on, just, we haven't finished yet.
Oh, I thought you were sending me to go.
I'm just saying to councillors, you know, we don't need to exchange phone numbers and things. What we're talking about here is a perfectly legitimate question from Councillor Mallett about whether a person had access to further information that our experts had not had access to. And I think you've just clarified that Mr Hughes was contacted by the current engineering experts to provide the information. Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Mallett, did you have other questions?
Yeah, and the other thing that I think I got from your submission is that no one theatre will accommodate everything that's required.
That's always been understood to
Yeah.
be the case. And it's always a difficulty when you're designing a theatre to try to make it suitable for all sorts of uses. It's just not possible. And it's not just a Hamilton thing, this is a worldwide problem. And there's been many theatres refurbished in the period that the Founders has been in operation. Major theatres in Washington and places like this which were built certain ways and they've been rebuilt again to suit different purposes, you know. And it's just, you know, if you want an opera, you've really got to put it on in a place like La Scala, where everybody sits in several rows right close to the stage with a nice easy sound. It's quite different from what you might have for the National Orchestra, which needs a long reverberation time.
So we would be right to be sceptical if someone said there was a design that would meet everyone's needs.
Absolutely. You may remember there was at Auckland, the AOT Centre. They tried to do that. They tried to make it's a limited size auditorium without long reverberation time. And the experts they had on the acoustic design at the time, which was Marshall, Harold Marshall was Marshall Day. Yeah, Harold Marshall was a leading acoustic engineer in the world at the time. We had him in New Zealand. And they withdrew from designing the acoustic qualities of that AOT Centre because they wanted to have a building with a naturally large reverberation time. And the people designing it wanted to do the reverberation time with some electronic means, some artificial electronic reverberation.
Okay.
And it didn't go ahead. So it's a very, very difficult problem.
Thank you.
Did you have a question, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Adrian, thank you for the expertise you bring to the table today. I would have liked to have heard another 5 or 10 minutes, in fact. But look, I've just got a question around the Gordon Hughes report of 2007.
Yeah.
And as you will be aware, Gordon has done significant work in Hamilton over earthquake strengthening in the last couple of years. Would that report in 2007 take into account today's government requirements over strengthening, or was that done prior to that work?
I've spoken to him about this. He lives not far from me. At the time, there were certain requirements, a proportion of percentages that it had to meet. It met 56% of the code in one direction, 80% of the code in another direction, and the requirement was so long as it was over 33%. So it was well in excess of 33%. Since Christchurch, of course, there's been some tweaking of the requirements, and he could quite easily revise those results in light of the new requirements. He would be quite confident it would still be well over 33%. But what he did was a preliminary analysis. What you're having done now is a detailed analysis, which is going to cost you a lot of money. But I imagine what Gordon did was a preliminary one based on the drawings that he had at the time.
Just in terms of those percentages, you've got the private and public sort of interests. Is it correct that most government, quasi-government departments are looking for a percentage that's in the higher 60s and preferably 100%?
Well, new buildings are different from, you have to sort of assess the condition of an existing building under the present code, because it was built over 50 years ago. I can guarantee it would have been well over the code when it was designed. Colin Fraser was a very sound engineer. He designed these buildings, for instance. Haven't fallen down yet. No, I really can't say. There was a time when government buildings, when there was a Ministry of Works, government buildings were designed to a higher standard. I'm really not sure whether that's the case today or not.
But I'm thinking more about hearing about a government department saying that they won't lease buildings unless they achieve this particular percentage.
Okay.
So if you're a landlord and your building was 33 or 38%, you're most unlikely to get a government department in there. You don't know that.
I don't, sorry.
He's not an expert on this. Councillor Pesco?
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Adrian. I think you and your firms, you and your firm bring history to, which is very valuable to us for these hearings. My question is, and follows on from Councillor Mallett's question about the acoustics. We have had in the last couple of days of hearings mixed messages about acoustics, and I guess when this building was designed back in the 60s, the acoustics would have been to satisfy the most of the groups who were likely to use it. Is it possible now that the technology around acoustics Or is it possible going forward that the technology around acoustics will be such that more groups can be satisfied in a single building with a set of acoustics that are likely to be, which are likely to provide good outcomes for a larger number of groups than perhaps would have been the case back in the 60s when the Founders Theatre was originally built?
Possibly. Again, it would have to be done.
Is the technology improving all the time?
It could be done electronically, but whether you'd be happy with the results is possibly dubious. Yeah.
Okay. So no matter what theatre we get, we're still going to continue having mixed messages from different groups that the acoustics don't fit their style of performance.
I would definitely expect that. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillor King?
Yeah, good. This is a $20 million to $50 million decision. Would it be wise for us to get Gordon Hughes to go over his 2007 report and come back to us under the new building code, the new rules for earthquakes, and get a second opinion through Gordon on where we are with this building? Gordon is a reputable local engineer who's done a lot of work in the Waikato for a long time. Surely
Councillor,
we're basing...
Can we just finish the questions, because I've got a note...
But this is a question to Richard. I'm asking Richard a question.
Because I've got a note to discuss this at the end of the submissions, but hey, go ahead, go on.
So I mean, we're basing a huge spend on one report. Surely not a peer review. A peer review wouldn't work. You'd need him to go over his 2007 report and come back to us with a full report.
I think Sean's standing to respond, but I can add some flavour at the end. But
Look, yes, we could certainly do that if you'd like us to.
Well, I think it needs a bit more response here, to be honest. I mean, there's a number of reports which the councillors are aware of. I mean, we've been given all of these back from then as well.
Yeah.
So the 2007 report is one in your possession that we've seen
correct.
and been given to us.
Yeah.
And so that, as I understand it, wasn't an in-depth analysis like the one you've had done.
No, it's
now.
not. It's not.
So perhaps if you'd just like to give some context for us.
Well, look, I think the context is, as has been discussed already, the 2007 report was certainly based on information and the code that applied at the time. The code is a very, very different code in today's world. So the new report and evaluation that we've done is about the code of compliance in today's world and on today's standards. I think there is no harm in us, or probably a good idea for us to get Gordon Hughes to do a report. The only thing I would add to that is that engineers' reports are quite often variable, so it's not unusual for one engineer to have a different view. The Gordon Hughes report, as I understand it, was also peer reviewed by another engineer back in 2007, and that peer review did not come through with the same rating of the Gordon Hughes report, but the council at the time accepted the Gordon Hughes report as what was set. So look, by all means, if it gives people comfort to get another report done, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't, but it needs to be done in full, and it needs to be done obviously based on the work that we've been doing at the moment.
so just can I ask a question, Sean? The current report that we've had done that came out last week, that was a far more in-depth report than originally done, and we've got no reason to question the findings of that report.
Yeah, I think it is a more in-depth report, but I really don't have enough background knowledge to talk about the Hughes report and can try and compare it.
So can I continue with my questions? So we're on the brink of a decision of $20 to $50 million based on one report. Gordon Hughes, I know Gordon. He's done work for jobs I've worked on. He's a very conservative engineer. He doesn't push it. He's had a lot of experience. Surely a second report, not a peer review, would be wise in the interest of spending $20 to $50 million of ratepayer money.
What's the component though? There's the fly tower issue, and then there's subsequently the earthquake review.
Yeah, look,
right?
the engineer's report needs to take into consider the strength of the stage house, the carrying strength of the stage house, the seismic strength of the stage house. Similarly, the seismic strength of the auditorium and the walls that support it, and obviously the attachments to the roof and so forth. So it is quite a fair amount of work to be done in terms of determining that. But if you want a further assessment, it can be done. We use the company in Wellington because we have been advised specialists in theatre construction and theatre builds at the moment, and have been involved as consulting engineers for a lot of new theatres that have been built around New Zealand and Australia in recent times. So it is a bit different. It's a bit specialist, but we wanted to go to a specialist firm that are familiar with theatre construction.
Can I add to this? We've had no reason to, and the firm we used in Wellington is extremely reputable, which I think is what Sean's implying. There's been no reason to question the findings of their report. In context, and Sean, can you correct me if I'm wrong here, a key part of the original budget, which we put into the 10-year plan of $13.8 million, was to effectively rebuild the back of house as a response for building this, replacing the fly tower. The fly tower, to meet current needs, was going to be in that 13.8 million, slightly bigger. As a consequence of that, we would have to completely replace the back of house, my understanding, to effectively respond to that flying system, and that the incremental from 13.8 million to the $20 million there was some cosmetic aspects in terms of, I think, new seats were included in there, but a main part of that additional $6 million was for the seismic strength of the auditorium roof and the auditorium walls, is my understanding. So the question here is what the latest report, the Dunning report's done, has validated our assessment. The response, and that's why at the meeting when we were actually discussing founders a couple of months ago, we all questioned whether or not we could have some accuracy over that $20 million. We could have accuracy over the $20 million. We knew for a large part of it, it was regardless of the earthquake strength, if it was 100% compliant at the stage house, we would still have to knock it down to be able to rebuild the flying system. So we had some confidence at that point in time. That part was significantly robust. If we were to revalidate the current engineering assessment, all we're really going to do is be able to fine-tune whether or not the auditorium, which is a $6 million figure, would require plus or minus a small portion of money to actually achieve those outcomes. So I don't necessarily know if it's value for money to commission a secondary report when we've got no reason to question the first report we've had done, or the latest report I should say, because it's not the first report, the latest report we've had done, because it's only contributing to a small portion of our decision making in respect to that auditorium roof only.
This is what the submissions process is all about, and new information has just come up to question where we are and where we're heading, and that's what this process is all about. The process is about listening to the public and see what ideas come up and what comes forward. And we've gone from the first budget, we budgeted $6 million, I understand, for this building, then we went to 13.8 million at our annual plan, now we've gone to 20 million, and now we're proposing to spend 50 million. We're all jumping on board with this fantastic new theatre ideas, but right now, going right back to the beginning, the question's been asked is, Gordon Hughes has put out a report which appears to be at conflict with the report we've just had done. Why wouldn't we slow this down, get a second report done from a second engineer so that we know where we are?
Yeah, and I'm not disputing, I'm pleased that we heard the information today. It adds value to the conversation we're having, so I have no issue with that. I was just explaining very logically the process we're going through in terms of how we got to where we are, and the information in regards of that current report is effectively given us some assurity, more so around the auditorium aspect, which is 6 million of that spend. I'm just telling you the components as it breaks down. And if council passes a resolution to do a second report, that's fine, I'm comfortable with that, and that's an appropriate step to make, and any council can put that forward. But I'm just explaining the components of how it's contributed to where we are today. I don't believe we need a second report. I understand, and I understand Adrian commented that our engineers had contacted Gordon in terms of his information that was available to make sure they were looking at like for like on the plans. A lot has happened since then as well in terms of Christchurch, percentage of national building standard and so forth, and I do understand that the most current report was more in depth as well. Yeah, so all I'm saying is the facts as I know them, and it's council's will if they wish to seek a second report or a validation of that report or a second report, then I'd support that.
But all sorts of things come into question here. What in our keenness to pull down the fly tower to put a bigger one in, we've then cascaded a domino effect right through the building where we've got to upgrade the whole building. It's even possible that even if we do build a new theatre, that theatre could be saved and left exactly how it is, depending on the engineering report. And I know full well if I was spending my money on my building doing an earthquake report, I would be getting a second opinion if I came through and said it was a $10 million a $10 million spend to upgrade it. Can I finish, please?
Yeah, no,
A $10 million spend to upgrade the earthquake alone when we can go out and get a second report.
Sorry, General Manager, did you want to say
And-
something?
Yeah, look, I'm sorry if I'm not communicating very well. I'm a bit sick at the moment. But the peer review that can be done on the report it can be done. I need to remind people that the engineering work is a result of our investigation into the refurbishment cost, so we could understand what the cost to refurbish Founders Theatre would be. So with or without the engineering work that's required, the proposal that we've always had is to refurbish Founders Theatre. The issue with the flying system is it's no longer safe to operate, and that's a primary reason for us to close the theatre down. The issue with the stage house is that we could not get any certification that it was strong enough to hold a flying system, with or without its seismic rating. So we need to do work there. With the current report that we have in terms of the seismic rating that's been advised to us by the engineers in Wellington, under current legislation or current government guidance, we could continue to operate the theatre at its current rating that they've suggested would be between 15 and 25%. But we can only do so for 5 years without fixing it. So if we had no fly tower issue, if we had no fire safety issues, if we had nothing else, and all we had was the engineering issue that has been reported, we still could operate legally for another 5 years, but we'd still have to be planning to do the work if we wanted to retain the theatre. So I hope that just sort of provides a bit of clarity.
Where I'm heading is that the building may be suitable to use as it is as a town hall, depending on the engineering and why. And what I'm suggesting from the information that's come through this morning is surely not a peer review. A peer review doesn't cut the grass. A peer review, all it does is goes over and adds up the figures and makes sure you come up with the same calculation. It needs to be a new independent report done by a second company, not a peer review. A peer review will come up with exactly the same results unless there's a calculation error.
Well, happy to go with your
Okay,
wishes.
so what I'm proposing to do is, well, if you want to put a motion, you can do it at the end of the submissions. So is there any other questions for Adrian? No? Councillor Mallett?
Would any of this been possible without Gordon Hughes' phone number?
Well,
When you
that's
think
the
about
only
it.
contact
Any other
point,
questions? Okay.
it would be.
Thank you, Adrian, very much for coming along.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Could I make one last comment? I don't really think you need a fly tower in this day with as I said in my speech, with LED screens. You can produce complete changes of scenery, instantly, and there's no need for a fly tower at all.
No, well, the experts are telling us that we do need one for props, for example, props like for Mary Poppins and Phantom of the Opera and that are significant weight, can't be
Even the fire curtain, you need one.
fire curtain, yeah. But look, thanks for your
Okay.
comments and thanks for coming along.
Thank you very much.
All right, the next speaker is Sky Sloper. 874 is the number. Morning.
874.
Good morning. You have 5 minutes, including questions.
Thank you, Your Worship, the Mayor and councillors. I'm coming from a different angle around the Founders and a new theatre. I come from a family of 7, and when I was about 13 years old, my mother took me to salad days at the Founders, and I thought it was just absolutely marvellous. I think that Hamilton as a city is coming of age around the arts. I think traditionally we've been a city that has put a lot of emphasis into sport. We have stadiums that are not used for their purpose very often at all. But I think that, as I say, we're coming of age around the arts. When I was at the Garden Festival last year, there was a children's orchestra of underprivileged children who were playing violins. The audiences at the Arts Theatre just turn out in numbers, and they get very good quality orchestral music played, and they appreciate it. So I think the time is right for a new theatre. I think that the arts community would come behind a new theatre. I think the examples of the sculptures down the south end of Victoria Street are a good example of what can be done when groups of people get together and decide that they want something. As far as the acoustics go, I have always been told by people who perform there that they are not happy with the acoustics at the Founders. I think that just in hearing what's been said about different types of audiences and different acoustics that are required for different audiences just here this morning, that we probably have already got other theatres that could accommodate the smaller productions, like we've got Claudelands, we've got the Academy of Arts at the university, we've got the Community Trust Theatre. I just read yesterday in the paper about the seismic testing at the Founders, so I'm wondering if perhaps the Founders could end up costing as much as a new theatre. But overall, I think we need to take our eyes off the cost, which is quite a radical idea. But I think that we need to be looking more at the vision of having a state-of-the-arts national theatre here in Hamilton. And I think that the arts groups, as I said, would come together and could make that happen. It may not happen this year or next year. It might be more of a long-term plan to get the sort of theatre that would be required. And the districts, I think, could also contribute to the cost. I think Hamilton Gardens is a great example of what can be done when people have a vision, and the money does come in when the vision is there. I listen to national radio a lot, and there's been a lot of talk lately about driverless cars, and I think that we need to be thinking also about the changes in traffic, etc., that is going to be into the future. So rather than think of a theatre for today, we need to think of a theatre for the future. So taking driverless cars, for instance, as an example, that traffic will change to the point where the car will come around picking different people up and delivering them. And also things like bus stops, cycleways, river access, all these things could be incorporated into a new theatre vision. And as for the vision that we have for down at the river at the moment, I think that that is the place for the new theatre to go. I think that there are plenty of cafes already in the south end of Hamilton, that we don't need any more cafes down by the river, that it would be better to have a marvellous new theatre. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mallett.
Thank you very much. You suggested a did you mean to say a national theatre, like we would be the, in some aspect, you said something about a national theatre, didn't you?
Yes, yes, that we could be.
Do you think that's realistic, given the huge populations in Auckland or possibly Wellington? Is that
Well, I think that Hamilton is definitely a growing city, and it's becoming, you know, a satellite city that is really going to be expanding. And I think the things like the building consents that are coming through at the moment for Hamilton are a good example of how fast we are growing, and the you know, the price of houses. Waikato Times says it's going up $1,700 a week for a price of a house in Hamilton. So I think we're growing very rapidly.
But is there a logical causation from being our third or fourth biggest city growing probably?
I guess I'm not
as
really talking
fast as
necessarily
Auckland is,
about the size of it.
But do you think there's a logical cause and effect that means we should have the National Theatre here?
I guess I'm not talking about...
If there is going to be a National Theatre, I don't
Okay.
quite know what that concept means. But
I guess my term national is really talking about the standard of the theatre, rather than the size of the theatre or having to be the best, but of that standard.
Okay. And also interested in your point, I can't quite remember how you phrased it, about taking our eyes off the cost. When we take our eyes off the cost, we obviously have to take our eyes off the people who pay the cost too, don't we? So we forget about who's actually going to pay.
Yes, well, that's where I think that, as I gave the example of the Hamilton Gardens and the arts community, that I think that the cost doesn't necessarily all have to come from the ratepayers. I think that there could be other groups that could get together and raise the cost for this theatre.
And we've had some suggestions from some of the submitters earlier. But generally, what happens is the bulk of it is funded by the ratepayers, and just about always the ongoing costs, like as an example, the Founders Theatre. The Founders Theatre was, I understand, fully, I'm just repeating what I've heard, was fully funded by private interests, I think, you know, donations and whatnot. That's my understanding. But it's then come into City Council ratepayer ownership, and has been funded just about all the way through since then by ratepayers. And now we're in a situation where the ratepayers are certainly, in the first instance, going to be the first cab off the rank in terms of funding it.
I guess I'm thinking, you know, that there could be perhaps a targeted rate, as there is for the Hamilton Gardens, to do with the theatre for each household. I'm a ratepayer myself.
Do you
I'm
think a
retired.
targeted rate is any different than just taking rates? I mean, it's spread evenly across people. It's just the same people you're asking for it, and you package it up differently and call it something different.
I guess it's the fact that
we want some of your money, please.
I guess it's the fact that it's earmarked, that it is going to go into the arts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for coming along and talking to us and telling us what your views are. Next speaker is Sarah Thompson. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. Good morning, Your Worship and councillors and staff members.
1770 is the number. Thank you.
So my name is Sarah Thompson. I am a long-time resident of Hamilton, as you can see. No, I've been here around 25 years, and over that time I've performed in a couple of things at Founders Theatre. Not sure I've performed very well, but I did. And I also have enjoyed lots of shows there, including the Phantom of the Opera was probably the most fantastic one that I saw recently. I have come here today because I think that this is an issue which affects everybody, including young people in Hamilton, who are going to be here and want to enjoy the city and enjoy the arts and have a really great, I guess, colourful and vibrant life here in the city. So part of that is having a state-of-the-art, excellent theatre for us to enjoy the arts. So firstly, demolishing is not an option. We need a theatre with the capacity either the same as or more than Founders Theatre. And we need our own identity as a city. If we just expect everyone to hike up to Auckland for, you know, every relatively big event or show, then it's costly, it's time consuming to go up to Auckland. I hate going up to Auckland myself. And we lose some of our identity as a city, because we don't have that facility there for people. And also, there's nothing else really in Hamilton which serves the purpose of Founders Theatre that it serves at the moment. My preferred option is a new build. I'm not an expert, so I can't say, whether we need one theatre or one with 2 rooms for accommodating orchestra kind of performances and one accommodating more theatre-based performances. But I do think that there's an opportunity here to have, a state of the art, firstly, a state of the art, well-designed, architecturally designed, distinct building in Hamilton. Most of our buildings here aren't that attractive, but we can make a start and have something which stands out and is an attraction here, along with other fantastic things that we have, like the river and the gardens and stuff. Also, we have the opportunity to possibly relocate over, like other submitters have said, somewhere in the city centre, maybe near the riverbank development, so we can be in the entertainment hub. You can go to the restaurants beforehand, afterhand, have a coffee, go to the bar. There's a real sense of connecting and a real sense of just, energy within a city when everything is located there in the centre with all the rest of the entertainment facilities there. I think that cost obviously is an issue, so and it is something that we have to think about from the point of view of someone who actually renovates houses as part of a living. I do know that renovating always costs more than what you expect, and there's always unexpected things that come up that you didn't see the first time you looked. So there is always the possibility that renovating could be more expensive than we expect. And I think that putting new money into something old isn't necessarily a good investment, and that we could have something much better, with better capacity, able to service our growing city and the young, So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Mallett, question?
Thanks, Sarah. You talked about a state-of-the-art facility. We've had a number of people who said one of the great things about the existing Founders Theatres is its ability to service the community-type groups, which is young kids ballet and school operas and that sort of carry on. Would there be room in the state-of-the-art facility for that? And arm in arm with that, would it be economic for the kids' ballet exams to be had there?
And I mean, that's a good question. It's really a case of how much the council is willing to then subsidise community performances and activities. And we have other theatres too, so smaller groups could potentially use those theatres. But yes, that is a good question. I don't have, magic answer for that.
Councillor Pesco?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. You're a good example of a demographic for these hearings that we haven't up until now seen. So thank you for putting some time and effort into your submission and presenting it today as you have. Would you, as a future ratepayer, and hopefully as a future ratepayer over many, many years still to come, would you be happy, and do you think that your fellow age group would be happy to pay increased rates that would reflect, one, the cost and the ongoing maintenance of a new theatre? Do you think that there's the support out there for the theatre, as well as the fact of saying, well, if we're going to have this new theatre, we'll also be prepared to pay some additional rates that might arise from the debt, as well as the maintenance of such a new theatre?
I mean, I can't, officially speak on the behalf of other people of my age group. For myself, I think that I'm willing to pay as a ratepayer for a new theatre. And I mean, I currently do because I pay rent, and that makes its way eventually to the council. And what I see as being really important for a city is being a place where people actually love to live and love to be. And that's the whole point of having a good economy. You have opportunities. It's the whole point of infrastructure and everything, because it ends up just being a positive place people like to live. And part of that is having the arts. And also, I think, combining things like a new theatre with refurbishing the shops in the CBD and having more pedestrian streets and cycleways and, you know, plantings and gardens. All of that comes together, works together to create a better place to live. So it's not just one single thing that ever makes the big difference. It's always a combination of many improvements and changes.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. You've answered my second question without me having to ask it, so thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yep, Councillor Green.
Do you see any historical value in the building currently?
Historical value?
As a younger person in society, do you see the history, the importance of having this older building there?
I understand it's around maybe 50, 60 years old, is that correct? I personally, I guess, would say that there's more value in a new theatre than clinging on to something old. It's not particularly spectacular from the outside anyway, but I guess it's a little bit more of a treasure inside. So I don't think that it necessarily has to be demolished, but there's a big cost, as mentioned, in actually bringing it up to stand and maintaining it, even as a community hall or anything. So I don't put a great deal of value on keeping it as something a historical building, but that's just my opinion.
Are you aware of the history behind how Founders came about?
No, I understand that there were a lot of private funding, people who funded it, and so that would be quite heartbreaking as someone probably to see the theatre not be maintained and then come to this point where you're looking at demolishing it. I think that would be a real shame for those people, but as, I guess, someone looking forward, I think, yeah, I still put more value on the new build.
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, that's it. Thanks very much for coming along and talking to us.
Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Okay, the next speaker is Peter Walls from Opus Orchestra, and that's the final submission. Welcome, Peter. Thank you very much for coming.
Right. Whoops. How do I get rid of that grid? Oh, fine. Yeah, thank you. Kia ora, good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you this morning. My first experience at the Founders Theatre was in 1965 when I played there as part of the National Youth Orchestra. That's becoming a rather dim memory. I've listed 4 roles on this slide, and I'd just like to comment briefly on each of those, but this is a personal submission rather than on behalf of any of those organisations. I really wanted to address these hearings because of my connection with Opus Orchestra. I've been music director there since 2004, and this has made me feel very strongly a part of the musical community in Hamilton, and I'm very concerned about the future for fine music in Hamilton. I was, as you see, Chief Executive of the NZSO, and in the 10 years that I was doing that, I attended many, many concerts and Founders. There was usually the second to last concert on a tour, so the following night we would perform in Auckland, and time again I would have eminent conductors and soloists and the players themselves tell me what a relief it was to get into the Auckland Town Hall after struggling with the difficulties of Founders Theatre. My current role is with Chamber Music New Zealand, and I will just return in a minute or so to make a few observations there. But finally, as an occasional guest conductor of the Hamilton Civic Choir, this has usually come about through my association with Opus, but I've had the privilege of conducting some major works in Founders, St. John Passion by Bach, Handel, Haydn Creation, and Handel's Messiah several times. That is always fraught with problems. Every time the choir goes into that venue, it has to be mic'd because of the problems that are associated with its design. So I've come here really to urge you not to try and fix Founders, not to throw good ratepayer money after bad. As a venue for orchestral concerts, the acoustics are terrible. It's in completely the wrong part of town, and it has very minimal potential for adding a sense of vitality and stimulation to the city. We do need a new venue here, one that would transform the musical life of the city, and in fact, I think has the potential to transform Hamilton itself. So I just want to spend a minute just elaborating on the acoustic problems. You probably can't read that, unfortunately, but it's from an acoustic design unit at the University of Salford in Manchester, and they point out that the era of fan-shaped auditoria really, the design of these auditoria are really strongly influenced by cinema design, and that actually they're always a bit of a disaster acoustically. When you add to that the fact that Founders is a proscenium arch venue, so that a lot of the sound goes up into the fly tower rather than out into the audience, it compounds already the acoustic difficulties of the venue. The third element there is that the stage is not wide enough to actually house a full symphony orchestra. So again, with the NZSO, we frequently had to leave some strings behind for the Hamilton concert. If we go on, this is perhaps an even more interesting thing about acoustic design. This comes from a report produced by Marshall Day Acoustics in 2003. Now, Marshall Day, as you probably know, are an internationally renowned acoustic design firm, and they surveyed venues, in this case for chamber music in New Zealand, and you can see that Founders Theatre came absolutely at the bottom of the list. And they comment again, just in passing elsewhere in the report, that the highest rated halls were rectangular, while the lowest rated ones were fan-shaped, and of course that's at the root of the acoustic problems in Founders. There's one curiosity about this report that I want to comment on, and that is that even though it was written in 2003, they have not included the Dr. John Gallagher concert chamber at Waikato University in their survey, even though it is actually the auditorium pictured there in the middle photo on their title page. So I just want to pause for a minute and talk about the importance of that venue. It's a tremendous asset to the University of Waikato, and therefore to Hamilton itself and to the Waikato. I think that it is by far and away that concert chamber and the whole Gallagher Performing Arts facility is by far and away the best facility of its kind in New Zealand. And that, when you put that alongside the very dedicated and talented teaching staff in the music department at Waikato University, that makes this music department punch above its weight. It actually is able to compete with the larger schools in Auckland and in Wellington. And by the time they add some more teaching facilities to that, which I gather is part of the plan, that will be a tremendous asset. The Dr. John Gallagher Concert Chamber is, I'm very glad to say, the home of Opus Orchestra, and it's beautiful acoustically. It's also where Chamber Music New Zealand does all its concerts in Hamilton. But I want to point out something very strange. Here I've just listed the average audiences in Hamilton, New Plymouth and Napier. So Hamilton, Chamber Music New Zealand audiences get around 178. This is a measure taken across from 2014 to 2016. So we get an average audience of 178 in that venue, which seats over 300. In New Plymouth, which has half the population of Hamilton, we get an average audience of 237, and in Napier, which has even less than half the population of Hamilton, we get 280. So almost double the audience for half the population. Why? Well, I think the answer is really clear. The illustrations on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that the TSB Showplace in New Plymouth is in Devon Street. It's right in the heart of the CBD. It's surrounded by cafes, bars, etc., etc. So it contributes to the life of the city and allows people to have a real night out when they go to an event in the TSB showplace. And this is, I'm not just talking about classical concerts here. Exactly the same thing applies with the MTG Century Theatre in Napier. It exists in the CBD and has connection both into the CBD with all its ancillary facilities and of course to the Marine Parade. So it is actually poised between the bustling heart of the city and the city's most beautiful attraction. So I think that apart from acoustic design, the actual positioning of a new concert hall is absolutely vital. When we look at the position of the Founders Theatre in relation to the CBD in Hamilton, which, as with those previous slides, I've just kind of marked out with a purple rectangle, you can see that actually it's a long way. Many's the time, particularly during my NZSO years, have I had to walk the 3 blocks or so between Founders and Victoria Street trying to get something to eat before a concert on a cold winter's night. If it's raining or whatever, that isn't a very pleasant experience. It's marooned out there, the Founders Theatre, and it does nothing for stimulating activity in the CBD. At least I don't think it does. Of course, the problem can be viewed from 2 perspectives. One is to think you've got a concert hall that actually isn't attracting the audiences there because the audiences can't have the night out they're looking for. The other is you've got cafes and so on in Victoria Street and in its environs that aren't getting the custom that they would get if they had a concert hall in the right place. There has, I know, also been a suggestion that a new concert hall might go out there with the Gallagher Concert Chamber at the university. I've already pointed out that actually my explanation for the much lower audience attendance at Chamber Music New Zealand concerts in Hamilton compared to cities like Napier and New Plymouth is that it's in an isolated venue. And I think that when you look at the campus over there on the right, the CBD and the purple rectangle and the Founders, then I think you would be creating problems by trying to build a major venue out there. That's not to undervalue at all the contribution that Waikato University makes to the cultural life of the city, which is absolutely tremendous. Here's a fact. There is no good symphonic venue south of Auckland in the Waikato Bay of Plenty. Someone's going to build one day, and if, for example, it were Tauranga, then I think a lot of very good shows would bypass Hamilton and just go to Tauranga. So I hope that we can get in first. I want to talk about the potential of the venue for what it could do for Hamilton City. Again, you can't read this, but I'm sure you're all very familiar with lots and lots of economic impact studies, such as the one from Bill that I've put up on the left of the screen, which is, of course, about the tremendous gains that Wellington City gets from its International Arts Festival every second year. And I think that, there is the possibility of a concert hall located in the centre of the city, perhaps in Victoria Street, perhaps on the banks of the beautiful Waikato River, but certainly with connections both into the CBD and to the city's most beautiful asset, that it would undoubtedly stimulate activity. And it isn't just concerts, of course. You've got that sort of venue and you start attracting convention business. In fact, one of my frustrations for years in Wellington was that you could go online and it would appear not to have any concert halls because the MFC and the Town Hall and the Concert Chamber were all lumped together as part of the Wellington Convention Centre. That's how important that element of the business was to what is now positively Wellington Venues, running for the moment only one of those three fine venues. A really interesting case study is Birmingham. So in the late 1980s, well, in the 1980s, Birmingham was planning a convention centre. And Sir Simon Rattle, who was at that time the music director of the City of Birmingham Somerset Symphony Orchestra, went to the City Council and said, you've got to design the main auditorium in this complex as a fine concert hall. And they listened and they did. They engaged the very famous acoustic architect Russell Johnson to do it for them. They have got a venue which is just a talking point all over Europe and, in fact, in the United States. It's a superb venue. And it has been really largely responsible for the revitalisation of Birmingham as a city. And that's why I was fascinated just to find this 1997 article from The Independent with the headline, "Could this be Birmingham?" You know, a city that was renowned for being drab, and right at the front of the article you get, it has a new and much admired symphony hall, and then as you go on through the article, it talks about all the business that complex has attracted to the city. So here's my vision for Hamilton, is a performing arts centre positioned where it can take full advantage of the beautiful Waikato River, and with easy connection to Victoria Street. It might even be in Victoria Street. And I believe that that would transform Hamilton. It would transform, of course, the concert life of Hamilton, but the benefit to cafes, restaurants, bars, retail generally in the city would be enormous. And as a prestige venue, it would attract concerts, conferences and other events to Hamilton. I have seen this happen. I've seen the magnetism of a fine venue and what it can do for other cities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that presentation and for your slides. Councillor Mallett.
Thanks, Peter. You talk, without being overt, but you talk about competition amongst towns and that or cities with regard to these things. We, as a country, I believe we've overcapitalised massively with airports and sports facilities and all lovely, lovely things, but they're never, ever economical, and we're all just competing against each other trying to get them. We end up building these magnificent facilities, state of the art. If you'll just listen, state of the art. Do you really think that New Zealand can stand this degree of expenditure or investment in theatrical, operatic sort of stuff? And you talked about the great stuff in Wellington and what's great in Auckland. And I asked this of Sarah Nathan yesterday and got a very unpleasant reply. Is it just a situation for some things we're going to have to accept we have to go up to Auckland or have to go down to Wellington?
Well, to be honest, I'm quite amazed to hear a Hamilton City Councillor putting such a view forward. Hamilton is, of course, the fourth largest city in New Zealand. It is growing fast. Surely you want this to be a city that is vibrant and working. So, you know,
but there has to
and
be
personally, your ratepayers, what you're saying is that your ratepayers should spend petrol money going to Auckland. Personally, given I'm not a Hamilton ratepayer, I would much rather, however, have a contribution made through my rates to having a beautiful city, a superb functioning city, and one with a cultural life of its own, than to spend hours in the car every week burning up fossil fuels to get to the beautiful Auckland Town Hall.
I guess the difference is the people who are burning up petrol going to Auckland are the ones who want to go to the theatre.
Who doesn't?
The ratepayer.
Who doesn't want to go to the theatre?
Well, let's be honest here. You showed us that there was we were a piddly number of people going to the theatre. So not every ratepayer. In fact, a vast majority of our ratepayers do not go to the theatre. Let's be honest here. There would be way more ratepayers go to the rugby ground, the cricket ground, and other.
Councillor, I think if you
hang on. So we're talking about one group of people, and I got good on you for going out to bat for your team.
So Councillor
No, hang on. You're going for your, but there is an
no.
Just let me finish this, please.
Yeah, well, no,
There is
you can stop, because when I speak, you are supposed to stop. And my question to you is this, and I said it yesterday, the value of this process is for people to come and tell us what they think, and for us to extrapolate out that presentation or ask questions to get more information. It's not an opportunity for individual councillors to cite their views. You get plenty of chance for that in July.
I'm asking for his response to my...
Let me finish before you speak. It's called respect for the chair. And when you're the chair,
respect for elected members.
and when you are the chair, you expect that as well. So I'm simply saying to you, what is your question? And please don't be argumentative to the person who's coming to present. They're just coming and sharing their views.
And I'm just
We may not agree with them, but ask the question that enables you to gather information to help you make a decision when we make a decision. So just ask your question. And if you don't like the answer, well, they're not going to change the answer by arguing at you. So you're arguing at them. So just ask your question.
Do you think it's fair that every ratepayer in Hamilton should be funding the, to the extent we're talking about now, funding the cultural preferences of a smaller group?
I would think that every ratepayer in Hamilton is funding things in which they have no personal interest and they are pleased to fund it. I'm a ratepayer in Wellington. I fund the Westpac Stadium. I've lived in Wellington most of my life. I've been into the Westpac Stadium about 3 times in all of that thing. So basically that stadium is not for me. I'm happy to fund it, just as if I was in Hamilton, I would be happy to fund Claudelands, I would be happy to fund the rugby ground, etc., etc. We all do that because we want a city that is beautiful, that functions well, that has a cultural heart, that has good sporting facilities and so on. So yes, I do think ratepayers would be happy to fund such a facility.
And you say that without it, as if there is no limit. Is there a limit? Is there a limit to how high we can be charging people for rugby grounds, for event centres, for theatres?
Well, of course.
And when do we reach that limit?
That is a decision for council, not for me. But I happen to be someone who believes that rates are a very good way to spend your money, provided you've got a council that is responsible about the decisions that it makes.
You understand, and you do quite obviously understand, that rates are a decision that you have no choice about, whereas buying a ticket or jumping in a car and travelling to Auckland is a decision you do have a choice about. So you're comfortable with the scenario where things way above, and I'm a great supporter of arts and sport and all sorts of things. I understand that culture, we start off with the needs of housing, and food, then we go to these high levels. So at what point do you think the ratepayer should be paying for someone else's pleasure?
I think I've answered that question, Your Worship.
I think you have. I don't think you're going to give a different answer, no matter how many ways it's asked. Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, and thank you for your very thorough submission. I'm just trying to get my head around, over the last day and a bit, we've heard a lot about the need for, and certainly over my time on council, the need for a facility that does cater for chamber music and then the performing arts. You had some numbers up there around average audience numbers for your concerts, average 178 at the Gallagher Centre. And then you put up New Plymouth at 237 as an average and Napier in 280. Now, at 178, that's only just half full because there's 300 seats at Gallagher's. So, and we've heard that over and over again, but what we've also heard is that there aren't enough seats, it's not big enough, but you're telling me that you're not filling it.
Yeah.
So my question is, are you saying then that the primary consideration is simply location?
Yes. Location and acoustics. So I use those figures only because they're ones that I have immediate access to in my day job. Chamber Music New Zealand chamber music is a kind of much more of a niche interest than, say, symphonic concerts, and so all our audience numbers are indicative of trends rather than telling you anything about the demand for seats in a replacement for Founders. But I mean, I can tell you that you know, this is now anecdotal, but relying on my experience from my years with the NZSO, that, you know, when the Michael Fowler Centre was built in Wellington, it was an attractive venue, and from that day on, one concert after another, and I'm not just talking about NZSO concerts, but primarily, goes close to filling it. So that's a venue with a capacity of 2,400. The venue itself, even though there's a lot of affection there still for the old Wellington Town Hall, the venue itself, people have the good night out experience. There will be regularly over 2,000 people in there. The Auckland Town Hall has a much smaller capacity, it's 1,400 seats. It regularly is full, and if you just take symphonic concerts, there's a very good chance that the APO will sell it out on Thursday night and the NZSO will sell it out on Friday night. So I think that what you see when you've got the venue is that everybody's interest, and for very good reasons, it is stimulated by that. So the experience of going to a concert in Founders is unsatisfactory. It's unsatisfactory because the acoustics are terrible and because it's in the wrong part of town. So you solve both of those, and Hamilton would become a very different city. So we'd start to be looking at headlines that said, could this be Hamilton?
Other questions? Yes, Councillor Young.
Right. Thank you, Peter. I know from your submission, you say not to fix Founders, right?
Yes.
So on the other hand, you mean to demolish it, or?
That's a decision for the council. I mean, it could be that you want to fix it and that you want to retain it as a community thing, but yep. I know that this question was asked of Sarah before me, and again, I would say that all these venues throughout New Zealand also serve community functions. So the most recent thing I went to in the Michael Fowler Centre was the Big Sing, which is essentially a community event. There are school prize givings, university graduations, all that sort of thing happening.
So you do see the value of, let's say, to refurbish Founders Theatre to the minimum standard without flight tile for community use, or those sort of...
With the change left over from your fine new venue, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, Peter, looking at the numbers which attend the chamber music, do you have any information on the age demographics of those persons who attend those concerts? Because Hamilton is a relatively young city, and they may wish to go to a rock concert in lieu of chamber music.
This, of course, is a very big question. It's one that occupies all concert presenters a lot of the time. So it is true. I mean, can I go back to my statement about those numbers from Chamber Music New Zealand? They are indicative, that they're a way of comparing response in Hamilton against, in the case of the slide I put up, New Plymouth and Napier. I would argue that it doesn't matter what cut you take, that if we were looking at NZSO audiences or whatever, we would see exactly the same proportionality flowing through. As for the demographic of classical music audiences, it is absolutely true right across the board that you get people coming in at student age, they tend to disappear while they have mortgages and families, and then they come out again at the other side. So, you know, it's a real, you know, a factoid or whatever, that you know, the audience for classical music is aging. I did once go to a conference in the UK addressed by the Minister for Culture there, who had a speech written for her in which she read from the Times an article saying how worried they were about aging audiences for symphonic music. And then she read out the date, and it was something like April 1913. So this is a problem that stays with us, and we do have to trust. We have to work very hard at getting the younger audiences interested, But at the same time, we've got a very large ageing population in New Zealand. That is a growing segment of New Zealand society, so we have to look after those people as well. But, you know, I think that a lot of what I've been saying applies across the board. I mean, of course, my knowledge is in classical music presentation, but I think that it would transfer out. I'm not the person to speak about that, but it would transfer out into all sorts of other genres as well. Thank you.
Any other questions? Right, thank you very much for coming. I understand that you came especially for today, so thanks for that and taking the time to do your presentation. It was very helpful.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Right,
Thank you.
Okay, so there's no other speakers, I don't think. I just better check.
That's us, Your Worship.
There's no others? Okay. So there's no other speakers, so that's the end of the submissions. So, Councillor King, did you have a motion you wanted to put?
Sorry, Your Worship, could I just ask a procedural question before we do that? We're just in hearings and we haven't advertised that this is deliberations or decision-making, so what's the process around that?
This isn't deliberations or decision-making. If councillors have some motions that relate to what information we may need for deliberations and decision-making, then it would be appropriate to take them. I mean, it's like yesterday we disposed of some sort of practical matters.
Yeah, but we've also, with all due respect, we've also had an awful lot of information, and how we've done it in the past is we've had time to go away and look at all of the submissions. I mean, I might have a list of further information arising from the submissions that I would like as well, but I haven't had time to digest that. I mean, when we're sitting in submissions, we're listening to submitters speak.
Yeah, and one of the pitfalls, as you know, because you've been here longer than me, is that people can come along and talk, irrespective of whether they've read material, are experts in the subject matter, experts in the field. I mean, people can just come and voice an opinion. That's what this is about. And it doesn't have to be an informed opinion or an expert opinion.
Oh, yeah, I'm not questioning that.
And our job, I guess, is to sift that through, given that we also have a voluminous amount of expert opinions and reports relating to the issues that this is what this topic's about. Just check with the Chief Executive. Did you see that there were any procedural issues to dispose of these sorts of matters? Or does Councillor O'Leary have a procedural point that I've got wrong?
I don't think you've got it wrong, Your Worship.
Okay. So, I mean, you can exercise your view on that in the way you vote, I guess. Councillor King, did you have a motion or not? I said I would check in with you.
I'm just going through the earthquake report, and it just to help me here, it appears that the report was based on leaving the fly tower in the building, and it hasn't been assessed with the fly tower removed. And where I'm heading here is we've got a city, I'm not necessarily against moving a town hall, but we've got a city that is going to be without a town hall for several years. And what my motion that I will put up is what I'm asking is, have I got it right that the report was about leaving the fly tower in? And what I'm proposing is a report to look at removing the fly tower to have a town hall while we get through.
Well, I think
and so a second earthquake report to verify that.
So, Councillor, what I'd be a little bit concerned about then, if that's where you're going, because I thought this was just about let's get another report.
Well, that's what my wording is. So
right, but if you're going to go down that lane, I would be a little bit concerned about that, and I'll tell you why. Because the earthquake, while we've been sent the report, it hasn't been formally presented by staff. Okay, and I'm assuming, as is the practice, they will go away, analyse it all, and if they require any additional information to supplement, to put it before councillors, to complete it, they will do that, and I was expecting that that would come at the July council meeting. If, as a result of that meeting, councillors then resolve to do A, B, C or D, it would sort of come out of that. So I'd be a little, you might be jumping the gun, I guess, is what I'm saying, if it's something much more than just what I thought you were going to do, which was to test whether councillors wanted to get another earthquake strength.
well, that's exactly the word. Can we put my motion up so you can look at that? And
see, I've got a few issues about that because, first of all, the expert was commissioned to go away and do the report in response to resolutions the council made about the direction of travel for this project, if you like. And then you're suggesting, well, it gets a little bit unpacked, and that expert then would have to respond to that before we went off and got another one. So I'm just a little bit nervous about where you're wanting to go here. I think it's more of a July council meeting issue.
Do you have a comment you want to make?
Yes, if I may, Your Worship. We have two things at play here, as I see it. One is that we originally had this work done, as I said before, so that we could assess the cost of a refurbishment of Founders Theatre, and that's where we had the discovery of the latest concerns over seismic activity. So the engineer's report was very much around the refurbishment option and the costs that are involved in that. If, on the other hand, and this came up yesterday, and we've actually had a bit of discussion about this, and you're leading to this now, if, on the other hand, there is a desire for Founders to remain open in some form in the future, for example, if another theatre were built elsewhere, then we actually have to do another set of work to determine what will it take for us to keep the theatre open and in a safe condition. And that is sort of like a separate exercise to what the original engineering report, which was all about, if we are going to refurbish the building, what is required from a strength point of view.
And that's to refurbish the building to operate as a theatre.
Correct, that's correct.
And the council itself has not determined, number one, is it going to refurbish or build new? And number two, if it builds new, what does it do with the existing Founders Theatre? And I think those are matters that would have to be debated and resolved.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know what I'm saying?
Right now, we're going into July to make a decision on what we've heard based on one earthquake report. What I'm asking for is a second independent earthquake report, so that when we do make a decision, we're not making our $20 to $50 million decision based on one opinion, that we get a second opinion. And while that opinion's being done, why wouldn't we consider, as part of that report, and possibly even going back to your existing people, removing the fly tower and not touching anything else structural in the building, so that we in effect can open our town hall again while we're making decisions on our new theatre?
Look, I think we can, on the question of can we reopen Founders if we remove the flying system, we'll test that and check that and takes the load out. However, the report we've got at the moment is very clear. We've got 5 years grace if we were to do that. If we were to reopen Founders Theatre and want to do some certain modifications, though, that may trigger further code of compliance to bring us into today's standard, that's a different story. One, I'm happy for a new engineer's report to be done. It's not a concern to me at all to have that done, and I understand the reason for the request. As you know, the downside to this is that it took us a long time to get the report that we've just received done because of availability of engineers and time and so forth. So my only concern is there's no way that we would have that second report done in time for a council meeting at the end of July to give you any new news. So that, you know, we would be talking about around 2 months at the minimum. So that's the thing to take into account here.
But if you read my proposed motion, I'm not suggesting that we don't go ahead and make a decision on a new theatre in July. What I'm asking for is, before a decision is made on what we do with Founders, which the two of them can go hand in hand in July's meeting, this is the problem. And what I'm asking for is that Founders is left alone until we get a second report done, showing what would happen if we leave it how it is with no structural modifications, and then if we leave it how it is and remove the fly tower. And I'm not proposing that we don't go ahead with deliberations and decision making in July about a new theatre. I'm talking about I don't want in July to hand in hand a decision goes to demolish what could become a town hall as part of the decisions that we make in July.
I think, Councillor King, this is what I was saying, is that I think these topics are actually topics for discussion in July. Because if, for example, the majority of councillors voted to refurbish Founders, then that would not be relevant anymore. If, on the other hand, the majority of councillors said, no, we want to build a new theatre, then that will be relevant. Now, if you're wanting a second opinion on the seismic situation of Founders Theatre to enable you to make a decision about refurbishment or new, I think that up there is something more than that. And the other matter I would raise is that I don't think it would be appropriate not to go back to the already commissioned engineering experts who have already done the report and ask them to separate that out. So there might be two reports. Do you see what I mean?
What's their opinion on that?
So I don't know, that's the way I'm seeing it. So
Well, I'm totally open to you adding that onto the motion, that we also go back to the existing, but what I'm not comfortable that, from what I've heard today, that I have enough information to make an informed decision on a $50 million spend or a $20 to $50 million spend in July. And I'm asking for this information to be put in place now to get the timeline, keep the timeline moving.
I mean, you can...
And by all means, if you'd like to add to that we go back to our existing engineers and ask the same opinion, I'm quite comfortable with that. And I'm sure that our existing engineers, because they've done so much work, will be able to come back to us before July.
Yes, so Councillor King, I'm merely giving you some advice as the chair on how I think we should proceed. You can reject my advice if you want to. That's up to you, and you can test the motion. But I have a level of nervousness about advancing to this stage without actually having done step one. But I'm not. I'm not going to stand in the way of you putting a motion on the table if that's what you wish to do. I'm simply trying to explain that I think there's a process that should be gone through before we jump to that conclusion. The other thing I'd say too is, while some people addressed, the life after Founders, if it was a new theatre, most people didn't. And I can, having listened to some people and read some of the other comments, there is a variety of views on that. And a little bit of me says at the back of my mind, again, I'm simply surmising here, is that in itself might be a bit of a project that requires some careful thought. Is it green space? Is it retained? Is it knocked down? Is it kept? Has it gone to the community? I don't know. If the council decided to build new, and all of that would be of no relevance and even discussed if the council resolved to refurbish. So that would be my only concern. But Chief Executive, are you comfortable for a motion like that to be put at this meeting? Are you comfortable with that? I mean, if there's no procedural impediments, we'll just simply test it. I mean, it can always come back. If it's defeated, it can always come again in July.
Just rereading it from a procedural point of view, democracy, do you have any concerns from a procedural point of view? I'm just going to reread it.
He's happy with the current engineer to come up with the idea.
Your Worship, if I may, I just want to be clear. I have comfort with the wording, but item B, the way I read it, suggests that there's no further report coming to council at all on this issue until that second engineering report has been secured.
That's how I read that.
And as I've said before, I would at this stage say at a minimum it'll be 2 months before we can get that to you. So it basically takes our plan to come to you in July out until after we receive that report.
But part of our decision in July could well be to build a new theatre and demolish Founders.
Well, no, the way that's written, Councillor King, on your motion, the July report would not come.
So based on the B, you're talking about deferring until we have that information, which implies, and we won't be able to get that information in time for July.
Well, could I ask the Chief Executive to modify it so that to get
well, I just think ultimately
get the timeline moving, and also
if B is removed, I suggest that we can then do that, commission the second part, and they'll carry on in parallel with the main part. Sean, is that what you're suggesting? If B is removed.
Okay, I'm happy with that. And also, I think you probably need to add to if you could get the wording right, Richard, to go back to the people who wrote the first report to get their opinion on this as well, because they've done so much work already in this direction. But this is different than the brief that we gave them. The brief we gave them didn't include removing the fly tower and just keeping it open. Our brief was just, basically it's to remove the fly tower, put a far bigger thing on the front, and that cascades a whole lot of domino earthquake issues throughout the building. You, sorry, Sean, did you have a comment?
Yes, sorry. Look, I think there's two things that have been introduced here. One is a second opinion on the report that was just released earlier this week.
Well, it's actually not a second opinion.
Or a second repeat of that report so that we can compare the two side by side. The second is an assessment from the engineers under these two scenarios, which is a separate exercise. As I understand it, you're suggesting we go back to the engineering firm that we've been using so that they can probably do that quite quickly, or with a greater deal of ease than because of the work they've done thus far. So there's two items. One is
Councillor King, what do you want in your motion? Could you just clarify what you want?
I'm trying to be inclusive of what the General Manager's suggested.
Yes, but you need to tell the wording. I mean, councillors are expected to be able to articulate what they want in a motion. What is it you want? Yes, I'm going to put the motion, Councillor, Deputy Mayor, but I'm just, as I always am, helpful to councillors to make sure that they get on the table what it is they would like us to vote on. And I spend a lot of time helping you all do that.
You just want to know if it's safe to open without the fly tower. Simple.
Yeah, it won't be very useful. We just won't be able to use it for that.
That's right.
Can we open it without the fly tower?
And Sean will address that issue in his report in July.
The same engineering firm can able to give us advice. You don't need a new one.
The report gives all the actual.
Okay, we ready? Mom.
That says to me that Andrew's talking about it gets downsized, it gets downsized.
Keep it open for 3 years because
Look, why don't you put it up? Put it up on the screen. Sean, stay there, just put it up on the screen.
So he's just trying to keep the foundation.
Because, yeah, so...
Is that right?
Didn't Sean say it's operational as it is now? You'll find
Yes, I think the second independent seismic assessment report of the Founders Theatre building, I think just been.
And as I understand it, that is specific to Gordon Hughes. Gordon Graham. Gordon
Hughes.
Well, I understood, Councillor King, you wanted it specifically to Gordon Hughes.
Of us.
No,
it's not.
no, I don't.
Not now. Okay.
I know Gordon. He's done work for me a long time ago, and he was
So it's
getting
not
on in years
specific
then.
to
So
Gordon
I'm not
Hughes.
talking about Gordon Hughes, the company. I'm talking about Gordon Hughes.
His report is 9 years out of date.
So
Correct. No, I'm sorry, councillors, I was just checking. I
No.
thought Councillor King wanted
no,
him
staff
specifically.
staff can make the decision on who's the suitable company to use.
Right. So there's a move, Councillor King has moved that motion. Is there a seconder for that motion?
May I ask a question?
Certainly.
So once this motion is passed, that means there won't be any report coming to council in July, right?
No, a report is
That's
still
not-
going to come in July.
July, even without a second seismic report. Is that right?
Yes, because that is the current council resolution, is a report in July.
And it's, I imagine it's likely that the Dunn and Thornton report, because they've done so much work already, will be back in time for July.
No, I will not make that.
No, it's
assumption.
likely. It's possible.
Look, we will do our best,
Yeah.
but look, as you're aware, it's been very difficult to get engineers to get reports to us in the schedule we've wanted. Could I just say, and I don't want to throw spanner in the works, but to be clear, for us to get a second independent seismic assessment, that's going to be another $40,000 for us to complete this exercise. So I just want to make sure people understand that's the implication.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pazzi.
Yeah, just a question perhaps to the General Manager. If we did commission that second independent report, would it be useful to have it as part of that brief that it compare its outcome to the first? Because I'm just a little bit worried here that if we ended up with a second report and that second report was quite different to the first, then we've got two conflicting reports.
We'd get a third one, Rob.
Do we then go, well, we go to a third one. You know, would there be some value in case, and I'm certainly not an expert in this area, but if it did come up with something that was completely different to the first report, should there be some benchmarking in that second report against the first one? I'm looking here to save some time and some money, or do we then do we then go to the third one to see whether or not we get 2 out of 3 right?
Look, if I may, Your Worship, through Your Worship, I think that's the purpose. What you're describing is actually a peer review. I'm not an engineering expert or how these reports are done, but what you're describing is the other option we have is someone simply do a peer review of the work that's been completed by Dunning Thornton. That is an option. Otherwise, you could have 2 engineers' reports. As you say, there could be some variance. I will give you my personal opinion, and I'm not an expert in this, but I've read through a lot of reports. I don't think you will still find that they're within a range that will be of concern to us, but we could get a peer review done across the 2 reports if there was any divergence. But we have a standard, our building control group, when they review engineers' reports, or have reports done, or sorry, I should say our property facilities group for maintenance of our buildings, they always get a peer review done on that report. That's sort of pretty much standard practice. So that is the other option that you have, rather than a full-blown new report.
So just to add another question onto that, Councillor King mentioned to me in quite a simplistic way that a peer review was simply a matter of checking the figures and the sums and adding them up to make sure they're right. Is that an overly simplistic view of a peer review, or is a peer review perhaps a little more detailed in the sense that they might actually challenge some of the outcomes of, in this case, the Dunning-Thornton report?
A peer review might challenge some of the methodology approached, and it might challenge some of the numbers. It's not just a matter of do our numbers add up to your, or you've done these numbers calculations and we'll add it up. They will actually peer review what's the methodology of the assessment, what's the core information that they get from the assessment, and do they, because then there is always a judgment element involved, and do they share the same judgment in terms of the formulas that are applied when they do the numbers calculation. So it's more than just adding it up, but it is still it is a peer review. It's not a full-blown forensic like we've done already.
So in this case, we could ask for that peer review.
Well, no, Councillor King, this is what he wants. And I mean, councillors, you know, sometimes we do work together, but Councillor King says, no, I want to put this motion. Now, if you want something different, you can, if there's a second to this, you can move an amendment. So Councillor King, I think we've got the wording right for you now. Is there a seconder on this?
Put the motion. We'll get a second.
So Councillor Mallet is seconding it? Okay. All right, so Councillor King, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, this is in no way about not going ahead with the second build. This is about we've been told that we've got 3 years minimum where we are going to have no town hall and up to 7. And this is about not removing, what I understand everything's been based on is that we want a bigger stage house at the front, and as soon as we start removing the stage, the stage house is condemned because it can't carry the weight. What I'm suggesting is if the weight could be removed, the stage house stays how it is. We don't try and upgrade the theatre. We leave the seats how they are, the toilets with no hot water. but we have a functioning town hall while we consider and go ahead with what we're doing. We're making a $20 to $50 million decision for the city and for the future of the city, and we haven't considered leaving we've got no reports that give us information on leaving it how it is, with or without a fly tower, but not increasing the stage of the stage house at the front, and having a functioning town hall in the meantime. I also think it's prudent when we're making a decision like this on such huge amounts of money, that why wouldn't we get a second report done? The reason why we've had these 2 days of submissions is to listen to what comes out. And today, I think somebody came out questioning just how sound the building is. And for the sake of $40,000, if that's what it is, and why wouldn't we spend that money to help us with our $20 to $50 million decision? So this is almost in parallel with the decision to whether we build a new theatre. This is not against building a new theatre. This is something else that's going in parallel to help with our decision making overall, and to keep our city with a place for prize givings and the kids who do ballet at the end of the year who don't have props or don't have, you know, heavy props and things. And so this is just investigating and checking. So I just think it's being prudent and being careful about where we're going here, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll speak. I'm speaking against this motion, and I think that the content of it is premature, but there are two aspects to it. I personally think that the seismic expert report, which has been done by theatre engineer experts in New Zealand, is sufficient for me. There are voluminous reports on Founders Theatre, but there is some consistency with the message. And I think sometimes we tend to want to get more and more reports because we may not like the content of them. I'm satisfied with the report. Secondly, I fundamentally believe that this is too premature. We don't even know what the decision will be yet, whether we're going to refurbish or build new. If that decision in July is to build new, and there'll be lots of discussion around what that might mean, then for me, I will be wanting far more analysis of Founders Theatre and what happens to it than that. There are lots of elements that would need to go into that, and could I suggest there probably be some community engagement required as well, because the topic we are discussing today right now was not the subject of the substantive public engagement that we've just been through. So I think it's dangerous to do these sorts of things, not because I don't understand what Councillor King is trying to achieve, but I think that it's premature to head down this track. And for me, I do not agree that we need more seismic reports. Shan Sheldon already identified the seismic issues. Our staff had done work on seismic issues, and New Zealand's theatre experts were commissioned to do the report, and they've delivered it. And of course, interestingly, it has confirmed what we already knew, right? So I think that's been missed in the media as well, and by some people. The other comment I'd make is, look, we've heard lots of different opinions over the last few days, and maybe it is my training, but I do weight those opinions in terms of some of the comments people make, because if they are not experts in those fields and they're simply giving their own everyday opinion like you and I would give, then there is a weighting that must be applied to those. And when it comes to this sort of stuff, I'm interested in the experts who have the full qualifications, just like the acoustics people. We've heard lots of stuff about acoustics. We've heard from the opera people, the music people, the theatre people. but there are experts on acoustics, and those are the people that we'll be wanting to listen to. So I would encourage councillors to vote against this motion, but that's not to say that when we come to July that we can't revisit these issues, and perhaps that we might craft them in a different way. Any other speakers? Councillor Tooman.
I'll be voting against the motion. When I look briefly at the seismic report which has been produced by professional engineers who are apparently experts in the theatre business, what worries me, of course, is from the brief look I've had of it, is the biggest issue with the seismic report is the ceiling of the auditorium. Now, in the event of an earthquake, it's my understanding that the walls would move and the ceiling would actually fall in. If this occurred during a performance or when there was a number of persons in the theatre at the time, I believe we would be totally irresponsible by allowing that theatre to be used by members of the public in the event that that occurred. And I think we could actually even be leaving ourselves wide open once we know that this could occur.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Leary, then Councillor Young.
Thank you. Yeah, I won't be supporting the motion. I still have reservations around the procedure of this. We have a number of members around the table that aren't here, and while I fully support any elected member's ability to be able to put forward things, this is far too premature. We haven't made a decision. We don't know if the council is going to rebuild new, bowl it down, turn it into a park, and this is $40,000 of ratepayers' money. So suddenly spending an unbudgeted $40,000 of ratepayers' money is being prudent. I find that a little bit interesting. I'm quite confident. Look, I'm only on page 8 of the seismic report, but I'm pretty confident of what I'm reading so far. And they do make comment to the 2007 report, and they actually say it's a relatively coarse assessment. We've also had the Securia safety report, we've had the Shand report, and there seems to be some common themes in there, so I'm quite comfortable with the outcome of all of the safety estimates that we've done. And yeah, I mean, depending on whatever we decide to do with a new theatre or rebuild, there's a lot more information that we're going to need if we do rebuild somewhere else and end up repurposing Founders Theatre. And so for those reasons, I won't be supporting the motion.
Councillor Young.
Yeah, even though I share a similar thought as Councillor King, but I will be voting against this motion. Basically, from the submission, we know quite a number of people looking for other options, like to build a new one somewhere else, but in the same time, refurbish Founders Theatre to the minimum requirement that can open for a town hall, for graduation, for community use, or something doesn't require a fly tower or any backdrops. That is another option. But for what we are looking at now is once we decided what happened to the future theatre, if we're going to rebuild the theatre at its current location, Founders Theatre won't be there. We cannot reopen it. And when we decided to refurbish Founders Theatre, that will be the same theatre we're going to refurbishing. Only one option is when we decided to build a new one somewhere else. Then we can look at what happened to Founders Theatre. So to me, I won't be supporting this motion, but I think we need to look at what exactly is going to happen, whether we have a new one somewhere else or we have the same one over there. Thank you.
Any other? Councillor King, right of reply? Very nice. Very nice.
Acoustics was great in here, wasn't it?
The Founders Theatre could be open today. Yes, it can. Okay.
Fire curtain's not there.
The earthquake, the report that's come back from Dun & Thornton clearly says that the theatre can be reopened today. All right? And without the fly tower. Okay, and there's no reason why we couldn't have a function legally in there tonight.
What is the fire curtain there?
Now, the size reports that we had done didn't take into account removing the fly tower. All I'm asking for is that firstly we go back to Dun and Thornton and we get the report redone with the fly tower removed, with all that weight out of the ceiling and without lifting heavy things onto it, so that it can be used as a town hall in the meantime. And secondly, with our desire to remove the stage box and put a bigger stage box on the front, that cascades and has a domino effect right through the building. But right now, that building is legal for us to have functions in there now. And there's nothing to stop that. What I'm asking for is new earthquake reports and redone earthquake reports with the fly tower removed to see how much further the seismic rating will come up from where it is at the moment. So don't misunderstand it. This is a condemned building, because it's not. With the fly tower, without using the fly tower, we are allowed to have functions in there now. So this is a big decision. On their submissions, don't lose sight of the fact that on their submissions, the biggest majority of people wanted the Founders Theatre to be refurbished and to stay where it is, okay? We've had a lot of people through here in the last 2 days who are passionate about theatre, and I admit I am too. I do understand theatre and I do attend a theatre. But what I'm saying here is we need more information. And I'm just asking that you support this to get the information that we need to make an informed decision in July.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I want to see if the general manager said whether Councillor King is correct that Founders Theatre can reopen today. Can it be reopened now?
The fire curtain is the issue. We would have to address the fire curtain at the end of the day from a compliance point of view. Let's remember the theatre was closed primarily because of the advice we had from the health and safety experts over the flying system, and then that knocks on to the fire curtain and other issues. The minute we want to change the fire curtain to fix that situation, then we trigger other code of compliance issues that we then have to comply with in order to make the building safe. So there is going to be substantial cost to reopen. And I guess while I'm on the floor, if I could just say, as I understand it, the seismic strength of the stage house, the evaluation of its seismic strength does not change when the flying system is removed from it. The seismic strength of the stage house, of the building, of the construct of the walls and the ceiling and the roof is that, not the flying system.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to vote.
Could I ask a question? If we were using the building as a town hall, do we require a fire curtain?
Yes, we would.
Is that because it's got a stage? Yeah, stage, okay. All right, so we're going to vote on this, and we're going to have to do it by the hands, everyone. So those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillor King.
Those for the motion, Councillor King.
Those against the motion?
Her Worship the Mayor Hardacre, Councillors Pascoe, Young, Chesterman, O'Leary, Green, Mallet and Tooman.
Right, so thank you for that. Now, we are finished, but just before we finish, the July... Oh, right, okay. We have to move a motion to receive the report, which is all the submissions and everything. So I'll move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I mean, this is procedural. All those in favour? Any against? Right, so we've officially received them all. Just in respect of the July report, you know, there has been some comments and some discussion around the table today, so I think the construction of that report is quite important, right? So I'm just saying, you know, dealing with sort of founders, its status, can it open tomorrow kind of thing? You know, to what extent and that I think does need to be covered off in the report.
And the budget associated with achieving that.
Yes, yes, because I know where Councillor King's coming. If, for example, I wanted to host a cocktail function in the foyer in front of the hotary, can I do that?
What's the minimum requirement to open
Yeah,
it?
if I want to just sit in the auditorium and have no one on the stage, which is unlikely, but you know what I'm saying?
You would be the Phantom of the Opera.
I know, I'd be alone, but you know where I'm going here. I think there are iterations of this that need to be clear, and I think also the public would like some clarity on that. So I think the component of the report is, status today, including pianos, hoteries and equipment, because it kind of, people are asking about practical things. And secondly, I did observe that some submitters did, I'm not sure that we'd recorded right what they wanted, because I noticed some submitters did sort of seem to change their mind about refurbish or rebuild. So I'm assuming someone's picked that up as they've been speaking. Making sure the numbers are correct.
The team's also going to go back through the YouTube clips again and just double validate.
Just to check that. I think it would be helpful to just get, whether it is an attachment, that just summarise again the dates of the reports and maybe in a few paragraphs exactly what the tenor of those reports are saying. I mean, I have reread them and, as a part of preparing for the submissions, and, they are weighty tomes, and, it would be good, I think, just so that we're clear, because a number of reports have been done, and Chan Sheldon's done a couple, so I think that would be helpful as an annexure. Could I suggest that, focus on what the resolution asked? So, we have a council resolution, that's what we are looking at. So I'm sure the Chief Executive will make sure the structure is adequate. So rather than people saying, well, what about this or what about that, let's leave the Chief Executive to make sure the structure's right and the report is good. It may be that there might be a number of motions that come from July, but let's wait and see, okay? But I think summarising the information would be helpful.
So can I just ask the Chief Executive, from a seismic point of view, are we allowed to use the building?
We're not allowed to. So I think Sean sort of answered that previously. If we could address the fire curtain issues, i.e., I think basically if we could put a wall down that met the fire standards across the stage, and basically all you're left with is the apron, we can still use the building. If you read the Dunning-Thornton report, it effectively says at its current building rate, we have 5 years to address it, but we can still use it in that 5 years' time. The issue is they would have to drop a wall down, either a fire curtain needs to be put in on the flying system, which we can't use, or a separate flying system needs to be built for a fire curtain, or a fire retardant wall needs to be dropped down effectively across the front of the stage, leave an apron, and that's what it is. And I think that's why the Mayor said, is that right, Sean?
Yeah, we could put a solid wall in as an interim measure. It would have to be totally fire retardant. It would not leave a lot of space in front between that and the apron of the stage house.
Because that wall would go down
right across the
where the walls are, and then you've only got that, what, 2 metres in front?
Yeah, around 2 metres.
5 metres.
In the centre at 5. But as I said before, the minute we do anything to change, because we've got 2 fire zones that have to be separated in the building, as soon as we do something to change the existing system, that will trigger change to other code of compliance issues, such as sprinkler systems. And on and on and on. So it's yes, we can solve that, but then there will be other work that will be required as a result of doing that change.
We'll specifically include that in the report, though, Councillor, so you actually know
That's
those
why the July report,
cascade effects.
I think, needs to be clear about, because I know the public are interested to know, now that we have all the information, what's the status of it? Okay, all right, so we're now adjourned. Thank you very much.
You,
oh,
Chair.
no, we're actually closed. We're ended. We're ended.
Oh, keep
Yes.
it in here.
No,
When
no,
I
I'm going to get
went in
some
there
help
and had
on
our
my
briefing
Angela.
on the situation, I was horrified that we had sprinkler